People. Y'all know what it is. Switch up. Go ahead, Babanu. You got it. Ooh, you ready for the call, sir? We live.
Oh yeah, I'm ready
Oh,
for
you
the
ain't
course.
realize we live.
I
We
do
live.
realize that we're live, but I have to plug this in.
Man, so I do realize that we live, but I have to plug this in.
We can't let the machines die. The
Oh,
machines
oh
are
no.
our only
Allies right
saviors right
now.
now.
Yeah.
When the
Okay.
savior becomes the machine.
So,
Dun,
yeah, I
dun,
got
dun,
the link.
dun.
All right, we started. It just took 15 minutes. Um, thank
Yes.
y'all for coming. And for the people that's going to be watching this later, thank you. Because I know some people had concerns that they had to work, not everybody could get on. They had prior engagements, but they wanted to make sure
And
they
some
have the
people are
call.
still sleeping.
Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty much. Because, the country time
Right,
difference
right,
over there.
right.
Yeah, so. Yes, yeah. I'm glad you said that. And some people are still sleeping. I said, yo, it's college courses. We're gonna do it the right way. You understand? We're gonna do it early. But I was gonna do it earlier. You was the one that said, it was too early, if you
My
remember.
goodness, what are
So
you thinking?
so only after I got all the people saying what they were saying, I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
You'll still be able to get it. You can watch it later. You don't have to be on particularly live right now. So I'm gonna let Babanu do his thing.
Let me get into it. There's a lot to break down. Cosmology 101,
Let me say, hold on.
mhm.
Damn, I know you're ready. Let me say again, thank y'all for joining on to the introduction to the ancient Egyptian mystery system. Yep. See, Mega, how you pronounce that name there?
Second Ma'ara Sarah.
There you go. Egyptian name. Says, yup, 7 a.m. in Cali. See? So some of the people, I know the rest of the people that's in Cali. I think it was like five more people that bought it in Cali. I know they sleeping. So, all right, come on, let's get into it.
Great. What is cosmology? We're going to be going over cosmology, the history of
I'm
cosmology.
sorry, do they need their books
No, no, they don't need their books.
right now? They don't need it right now.
Not for this one.
Oh, not for this part.
No, not for this course. It's for the next one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So the other one you're gonna get into.
When we get
Oh,
into
all
the
right, all right.
cosmology, I don't know.
Okay. So here y'all go. Proceed, sir.
Cosmology is the science and origin of creation of the universe, life, and all the known phenomena of the universe. It's the creation of it. Uh, the word cosmology is derived from the Latin word cosmos. The cosmos is the universe, the totality of what we can see with our eyes and with advanced instruments. What we know the universe to be is where the word cosmos comes from, and cosmology is the study of it, but more so is the study of the creation of it. The cosmology that set up that pretty much instructed the Western world, which is agnostic. That's not what it was, and we are going to, get into that. Modern Western cosmology, though, has settled on the Big Bang theory as a major event and source of creation for the universe. It's important to note that in Western cosmology, there's no created deity or created deities, and this started with the Greeks. Prior to this, the Greek cosmology, it was very, very basic, and we are going to get into that. The Greek philosophers, I think it was Aristotle, started to move away from the mythos for their creation stories, and their creation stories, they're actually not advanced, but they do synchronize a little with some of of the planetary bodies. when cosmology started to be developed by the Greeks that moved away from the mythos, it was really about understanding the planetary bodies and the movements of the planetary bodies. Cosmology and astronomy. The foundation of cosmology in the Western world was mainly centered on understanding the solar system. True astrology is based on astronomy, so it was astronomical. Conversely, the Greek cosmologists, it would seem, were trying to understand the motion of the planets, and they were stuck on a two-dimensional model of the planetary bodies. That really is the flat Earth origin and theory. For them, not only was the Earth flat, but all of the planets and planetary bodies out there were flat, because that's pretty much how they look. When you look at the moon and you can see it, it looks flat. So, interestingly enough, it was Ptolemy, an Egyptian, who introduced the concept of three-dimensional spherical bodies. This is they were in close co- connections with the Greeks. So whilst the Greeks were purporting this idea of just two-dimensional bodies, Ptolemy and Egyptian was saying that the planetary bodies are spherical, and in the past few years we have had a resurgence in the flat Earth theory. Very, very interesting. It's such a savage and primitive notion of a planetary body being, flat as opposed to spherical. It goes against aerodynamics. The planetary bodies are circular for aerodynamic reasons. And the fact that they rotate on an axis is also going to make it more likely and make more sense that they are spherical. Yet we have this introduction of the flat Earth theory. Even Joel wanted me uh, a couple shows back to speak of the flat Earth theory. I was like, this thing is so stupid, and it is important to understand that going back to Greek mythology and this flat Earth theory, the ancient Egyptians saw the Greeks as children, and they saw them as children because they had no connection to Atlantis. And during the Atlantean period, where you had so much sophistication of technology, it was much more obvious that people could get closer to the planetary bodies. People had star maps, in the Atlantean days. People have had, 3D modeling renditions of planets, stars, star maps, and those types of things. Once that fell, the Camus were a continuation of that knowledge without the instrumentation, though, without being able to just, pull out a tablet and hit a button, show, this is, planet Earth, etc. This is the sun, moon, stars, it could be Neptune, it could be Pluto, it could be Mars, it could be Jupiter, being able to show those types of things. Now, with the Greeks, now they were pretty much, why they were called children. They were left to discover on their own, and there wasn't any type of advanced deities teaching them about life, about the universe, about creation, about science. They were exploring blindly with their limited perspective. So it is important to understand that with the development of contemporary cosmology originated from the Greeks, that at this point in time, cosmological understanding had already gone underground, meaning that this was the dawn of the agnostic era. which continued up with Constantine, and you will see that uh there was a bone of contention between the Roman Catholic Church and what they call the scientists. And the scientists were saying, well, we need to do the research, because they were still researching and trying to figure things out. So they were trying to figure things out. That light had been lost, which is why it is critical and good to read a book called Ancient Egypt Light of the World, with the concept being that the ancient Khmu, they had the most advanced understanding, doctrines, writings, teachers as well. People from many parts of people from Asia, the Middle East, they traveled to go to school in ancient Kemet. It was a mecca of learning. Um, in other words, for the Greeks and for the rest of the Western world, they were trying to understand the universe. Their cosmological doctrine was theoretical and of their own mind and perception. There was no creator deity or deities inspiring their understanding of the universe. There was no deity or deities at all. Now they had pretty much um, being disconnected. They weren't being inspired. They had to figure it out on on their own, which is a lot of the reason why they were called, children, and had such theories as planets being two-dimensional. Absolutely incredible. Conversely, other African people had a cosmological doctrine that referenced a created deity or deities, but it was this Greek notion that has become the standard in agnostic Western doctrine, pretty much set the stage up for even the Big Bang Theory, and it's just some uh, event that came out of nowhere, and that's how life began. There was no deity, god or goddess. In the study of cosmology, we can discern a critical part of human history centered around Northeast Africa and the Middle East. This has a lot to do with the agnostic paradigm that had already started, where the guiding light of wisdom was to become a cult, and the public and professed understanding was theoretical and was an obvious attempt to understand a universe that they did not understand. So, what happened is that now, if you wanted really advanced understanding, you had to go into the mystery schools, which is why when they talk about when they call it the mystery schools, back in the 90s when I had started to learn this, the Egyptian schools were called the mystery schools. Even with invasions of Kemet, with it fallen, the mystery schools continued, where people would go and get far more information than the public, and they were sworn to secrecy. With the information age now, there's a lot more access to this information. You know, if you're not, it it went from libraries, occult bookstores. Now a lot of information is on the internet that would supplement, the science with the occult. Not necessarily that it would correlate it, or that you would see that, there's this obvious scientific correlation with uh you, you know the occult doctrines with the deities and stuff like that, meaning that right now there is still a contention between religion and science, and that was set up, thousands of years ago, about 2000 or so years ago. And you want to come out of that by kind of getting, first of all, knowing that is what it is. This is why You can say so many people are, blind, and now this is why you have so many people that are so comfortable with rushing to talk about life, but without, you know, either going through initiation or getting divine contact or taking their time to really do scholastic research that is broad based. Like, give yourself, 7 to 10 years before you even start, to teach. But there's such inertial force. It usually takes some type of crisis in your life where you realize that you need some guidance, about life. In this, the the Greek cosmologists believed that the planetary bodies were flat, so they couldn't ascertain how they move. They couldn't develop any kind of mathematical models of trajectory. That's the problem with the flat Earth theory, and that's the problem that the Greeks ran into. And like I say, it's so easy for people to just get up on a soapbox and start giving information that supports their theories or their ideas, but it actually doesn't. When you get into critical research, you will see that the flat Earth theory is not mathematically sound. After Ptolemy introduced the idea that the planetary bodies were spherical and not flat, it took another few centuries for Islamic, obviously Moors, to begin developing mathematical models to calculate the movements of the planetary bodies. And as well, and I should probably pull this up. Let me look this up for all the people out there who have a connection to the internet. You just don't want to hear this talked about. You want to look it up. The Antikythera mechanism. Now, if you juxtapose the dates of this, Greek foray into cosmology and how much it has set up the foundation for the Western world, you look at the Antikythera, which is a machine that was actually made around that time in that era that accurately plots all the planetary bodies, the constellations, and stuff like that. It is spelled Antikythera, and Antikythera. This is very, very critical. When I asked my chefs, my ancestors, how do the planets, rotate around each other, they told me gears. The Antikythera is built with gears. More than 100 years ago, an extraordinary mechanism was found by sponge divers. I keep hearing the word sponge in my head over and over and over again. It's about the sponge divers at the bottom of the sea near the island of Antikythera. It astonished the whole international community of experts on the ancient world. Was it an astrolabe? Was it an array or an astronomical clock or something else? For decades, scientific investigation failed to use much light and relied more on imagination than facts. However, research over the last half century has begun to reveal its secrets. The machine dates from around the end of the second century BC, 200 BC. What time was Plato and Socrates and these guys, operating? So there were two schools of thought still in operation. One had went underground, and they would still have these, advanced scientific devices that, takes very advanced mathematical understanding to create. When you get into how many gears are on each wheel that can calculate things like the leap year, you know, how do you do that with a device like this? Let me get a little bit more information on it because we have people who are obviously lost as to the movements of the planets and planetary bodies, and then we have here obvious proof that there are people who have very, very superior understanding. And that's why I say we have uh, a, 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 a trajectory from Gnosticism to agnosticism. The Antikythera mechanism is an ancient Greek analog computer. The Greeks are confused, but they have an Antikythera. uh, there's more to meet the eye as to what's going on the planet. Used to predict astronomical positions and eclipses for calendar and astrological purposes decades in advance. It could also be used to track the 4 year cycle of athletic games, which was similar to an Olympiad, the cycle of the ancient Olympic Games. The artifact was retrieved from the sea in 1901 and identified on 17th of May 1902 as containing a gear wheel by archaeologists. Valerio Stais. Among wreckage retrieved from a wreck off the coast of the Greek island of Antikythera, the instrument is believed to have been designed and constructed by Greek scientists and has been variously dated to about 87 before the Christian era, or between 150 and 100 BC, or up to 205 BC, or to within a generation before the shipwreck, which has been dated to approximately 70 to 60 BC. So they're not fully certain. There are within 100 or 200 years. The device housed in the remains of a 34 centimeter by 18 centimeter by 9 centimeter wooden box was found as one lump, later separated into three main fragments, which are now divided into 82 separate fragments after conservation works. They had to use some type of imaging of this machine to get all of the inner parts and stuff like that so that they could reconstruct it. Detailed imaging of the mechanism suggests that it had 37 gear wheels, enabling it to follow the movements of the moon and the sun through the zodiac, to predict eclipses, and even to model the irregular orbit of the moon, where the moon's velocity is higher in its perigee than in its apogee. This motion was studied in the 2nd century BC by astronomer Hipparchus of Rhodes, and it is speculated that he may have been consulted in the machine's construction. Hipparchus, another good name to know. Remember that the Greeks were educated by the Egyptians. Um, Pythagoras, his name is Pythagoras, with all the mathematics and the trigonometry. However, with the Socrates and Plato guys, that didn't seem to be part of their education for some reason. The knowledge of this technology was lost at some point in antiquity, and technological works approaching its complexity and workmanship did not appear until the development of mechanical astronomical clocks in the 14th century. All known fragments of the Antikythera mechanism are kept at the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, along with a number of artistic reconstructions, replicas of how the mechanism may have looked and worked. The Antikythera mechanism was cogwheel. It is generally referred to as the first known analog computer. The quality and complexity of the mechanism's manufacture suggests that it has undiscovered predecessors made during the Hellenistic period. What is also important about this is that for these guys, Aristotle and these guys, the Earth was the center of the universe. The sun was going around the Earth. They didn't have a heliocentric model with the sun being at the center of the solar system, and that's a very, very, egocentric view. You know, um, they also didn't really think of life being outside of Earth, as well. That had to be postulated. So we went from people that had, contact with beings, deities, even family members, to keep it real, from different planets, seeing, spaceships and these type of things, now to people who are totally in the dark, wondering, is there anybody else out there? It's probably lonely. It is more likely that the disc was a bronze decoration on a piece. Sorry. In 1974, Derek de Solar Price concluded from gear settings and inscriptions on the mechanism's faces that it was made about 87 BC and lost only a few years later. Jacques Cousteau and Associates visited the wreck in 1976 and recovered coins dated between 76 and 76 BC. So this is a more accurate date. The mechanism's advanced state of corrosion has made it impossible to perform an accurate compositional analysis, but it is believed that the device was made of a low tin bronze alloy of approximately 90%, 95% copper, 5% tin. Its instructions were composed in Koine Greek. In 2008, continued research by the Antikythera Mechanism Research Project suggested that the concept for the mechanism may have originated in the colonies of Corinth. Of course, they're going to try to put it outside of Africa, since they identified the calendar on the metallic spiral as coming from Corinth or one of its colonies in northwest Greece or Sicily. Syracuse was a colony. I really don't want to get into more. I want to get into the device. And that's pretty much about it with that device. Um, so what it says there, what might be hard to discern is that cosmology. I'm teaching a class. You can't be here now, little girl. Do you want to learn? Yes. That's $600. Yes. You have to go to your mom. No. Hey guys, excuse me. Excuse me, guys. No, you have to go. I'm teaching a class. No. No. Okay, then you have to sit right here. Sit right here and just listen. You're gonna have to help me teach this class. Then I'm gonna have to pay you. Okay. What might be hard to discern is that cosmology centered on astronomy because that is the study of the heavenly deities and their movements, affects, events on planet Earth. However, this cosmological study of the planetary bodies was purely agnostic by these people. Astriarchus of Samos, it is said that he was the first to present a heliocentric model of the universe, even with an Antikythera coming out of Greece, which is probably why it probably didn't come from the Greeks. What's that? It's coconut water. Please, can I have that hat? That's another $600. You're gonna have to get a business. This is Joe Benjamin's daughter. She's gonna have to learn that you're gonna have to go ask your dad for some money to get these things. No. Well, other people are paying. Um, Aristotle and Ptolemy had a geocentric model of the universe. Nicholas Copernicus. We also have to look up Nicholas Copernicus as well. Devontae, I need you to get her.
So let me call you right back later, okay?
Vangelia Massey authored a book called Ancient Egypt, Light of the World. It's critical to understand that once that light went out, it was in concert with the common agnostic paradigm, and it was saying that the Greeks would be the leaders of such a paradigm, and then the Romans, and the Romans pretty much conquering a lot of Europe with the Roman Catholic Church, and the whole push of religion against science, unscientific religion against science. Why cosmology is such is very, very important to have a cosmological doctrine that is scientific and relates the divinities who are the architects of creation. After the Greeks, it should be the Romans who took this agnostic agenda to Europe. Knowledge was also concealed from the Romans. I had an interesting vision right after I got initiated into Haitian voodoo that showed that the Romans' knowledge was hidden from them, but they discovered in a temple in the basement. They made a very, very important discovery that led them to a lot of power and information. And they got connection there with Lucifer in the basement of that temple, and the 72 generals in Lucifer's army. That was the way that cosmology was centered on the visible planets that were closest to Earth only makes sense, but it means that young and immature minds were grasping at understanding what they realized was an existence of life far beyond their comprehension. So we now going to advance now into as cosmology developed. There's the Greek worldview here, and get into there's looking at you know uh their understanding with the two-dimensional bodies and not being able to relate it mathematically and calculate and predict the movements and stars like that. Prior to that, the Greeks had a the Greek cosmology is what became mythology. Greek mythology is what is now Greek cosmology, and Greek cosmology is Greek mythology is very, very basic when you look at the cosmology of the Dogons, when you look at the cosmology of the I Ching, when you look at the cosmology at Anu, even when you look at the text of the Shabaka stone, and just to burn it into to your head, the people that were going to be leading uh, the masses in thinking were the people that were the most lost, and we are suffering from the inertia of that. So for the Greeks, this was their cosmology here. In the beginning, there was only chaos, the gaping emptiness. Neither all by themselves or out of the formless void sprang forth three more primordial deities: Gaia, which they're saying is Earth, Tartarus, the underworld, and Eros, love. Once love was there, Gaia and Chaos, who were two female deities, were able to procreate, obviously without males, and shape everything known and unknown in the universe. That cosmology oftentimes, if not always, shows something about the people who have the cosmology psychologically. Their creators were two females as opposed to male and female. In the Canoe cosmology, there's a pairing of primordial male, female, male, female, male, female. And historically, we know that the Greeks were, homosexual. So their creators were procreating like that in their cosmology. The children of Chaos and Gaia. Chaos gave birth to Erebus, darkness, and Nyx, night. Erebus slept with his sister Nyx, and out of this union, Ether, the bright upper air, and Hemerla, the dead, emerged. Afterward, feared by everyone but her brother, Night fashioned a family of haunting forces all by herself. Among others, her children included the hateful Moros, which is fate, the Black Curd doom, Thanatos death. This is what they are dealing with as a people. You know, hateful Moors fate, doom, death, hypno, sleep, Neroid dreams, Garrus old age, Oisis pain, Nemesis revenge, Eris strife, Apate deceit, Philot sexual pleasure, Momos blame, and the Hesperides, the daughters of the evening. This is what they are dealing with. Now, when you get into, you get further into their deities, they are dealing with Narcissus, which is narcissism. Eros, eroticism, which isn't, that's their love is eroticism. Meanwhile, Gaia gave birth to Uranus, the starry sky. Uranus became Gaia's husband, surrounding her from all sides. Together, they produced three sets of children: the three one-eyed Cyclops, the 300-handed Hecatoncheires, and the 12 Titans. The 12 Titans would be the constellations. And as it goes further, you see, Kronos is Geb, Rhea is Newt. So they do have some correspondences with other cosmologies, but they have pieces. And what is really saying is that their minds are fractured. However, Uranus was a cruel husband and even crueler father. He hated his children and didn't want them to allow them to see the light of day, so he imprisoned them in the hidden places of the earth, Gaia's womb. This angered Gaia, and she plotted with her sons against Uranus. She made a harp, a great adamant sickle, and tried to incite her children to attack Uranus. All were too afraid except the youngest Titan, Cronus. Wow. Cronus devouring his children. When you look at Kronos devouring his children, this was something as well relayed to them, but what it really meant was that Earth, Kronos being Earth, Geb, um, Gaia is Earth, but Kronos is what they call Geb. That's the god of the Earth, and we we are born in the earth and then we die and it swallows us. So that's just really what that is. Kronos eating his children, but it's from a childish mind, and it is given to childish minded people. You give that those types of ideas to kids. You don't give those type of ideas to grown folks. Grown folks want the cosmology at Anu. They want to have the cosmology of the I Ching. They 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 want to have a more mature understanding of life. But there's a saying: it takes light to receive light. Gaia and Cronus set up an ambush for Uranus as he was preparing to lay with Gaia. Cronus castrated him with the sickle, throwing his severed genitals into the ocean. It is unclear as to what happened to Uranus afterward. He either died, withdrew from the earth, or exiled himself to Italy from the blood that was spilled on the earth due to his castration, emerged the the giants, the the melee, the ash tree nymphs, and the Erinyes, the Furies, from the sea foam that was produced when his genitals fell into the ocean arose Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty. Cronus became the next ruler. He imprisoned the Cyclops and the Hecatontures in Tartarus and set the dragoness Campe to guard them. He married his sister, the Titaness Rhea, who bore him 5 children. Remember, Rhea is Newt, and in the Camus cosmological doctrines, um, Newt couldn't have any more children. She was restricted from having more children, and it was one of the deities that played a game with Tehuti and one, and she was allowed to have 5 more children. So we're seeing elements of an older, more accurate cosmology, well, cosmological doctrines and ideas filtering into the Greek cosmology. However, Gaia and Uranus, and the 5 children, that what is important about that is that the year used to be 360 days and now it's 365, and that could only happen if the radius of the trajectory of the earth around the sun expands so that the distance is longer. The Greeks couldn't make those calculations. So for them, it's just a mythology of a deity having children. For them, it's not that the universe, that the solar system expanded to allow for, 5 more days, you know? Um, way different. Gaia and Uranus had both prophesied that Cronus would eventually be overthrown by one of his sons. So much like his father, Cronus maltreated his children, devouring each of them at the time of birth. Rhea was distressed by Cronus' treatment of her children, and just like Gaia before him, plotted against her husband on the advice of her brother. When it was time to give birth to her 6th child, Rhea hid herself on Crete, leaving the newborn child to be raised by the nymphs of the island to conceal her act. She wrapped the stone in swaddling clothes and passed it off as the supposed baby to Cronus, wrapping children in swaddling clothes, who, unaware of her intention, swallowed it yet again. The return of Zeus. The child was Zeus. Zeus had to get him to vomit up all of his brothers. Raised by the nymphs Androstea and Ida and the she goat Amathia, he quickly grew into a handsome youth in a cave on the Cretan Mount Ida. When the time came, he left Crete to ask his future wife, the Titaness Metis, wisdom for an advice on how to defeat Kronos, and she told him how to give him something that would make him vomit them. He was still in command and yet to be defeated. He was too old to protect himself from the attacks of his progeny, but he enlisted the help of the faithful Titans, who also feared the new generation of gods. And this is similar to me to the Anunnaki and Nephilim story, where you have um, you know man is being created by the gods as being lesser gods, half god and half man, but not being liked by a particular faction of gods. There's always this place where mankind has an enemy that is on the level of like deity, and needs to protect himself, as though life is that difficult for us. enemies to be feared. Now let me get here now, because this right here now we want to start to get to the point where they started to really in introduce the mathematics. So I'm going to start. It says here, as the Roman Empire fell. So that was the Greek mythology, which for me, I could understand why maybe people like Aristotle and Plato wanted to, have a better understanding of the planets and the solar system and those type of things, because that is much of what they had, and it's really confusion. And after a while, and probably with visits to ancient, probably with visits to Egypt and going there and learning, they were inspired to take a more mature look at the universe, but they weren't given great books and ideas. Maybe part of it was their temperament and a resistance by people that had that knowledge to actually show you and teach. As the Roman Empire fell and civilization in Europe collapsed, the rising Islamic civilization rescued Ptolemy's cosmology and improved upon it. The entire system was transmitted back to the West as learning revived there toward the end of the Middle Ages. Renaissance translations reveal the transitions. Ptolemy's mathematical treatise came to be called Megist, Greek for greatest. This was transliterated into Arabic and prefaced with the definite article al, the the, also seen in words like algebra and star names like Aldebaran. Translated from Arabic into medieval Latin, Ptolemy's book became the Almagest. The Arabs also taught the West Arabic numerals, the place value system of calculating using zero, and many trigonometric techniques, all originally, they're saying, from India, and made important mathematical advances of their own. Islamic civilization enjoyed a high level of scientific work. Astronomy was important for giving times of prayer. So, going back to cosmology and how the Greeks were seeking to get an understanding of the planetary bodies and their movements, because that's the deities. So when the Muslims want to know, have accuracy on the movement on the planetary bodies, is because they're optimum times for our prayers based on astrological conjunctions. From the altitude of the sun or stars and the Qibla are sacred orientation. Qibla is Kabbalah, sacred orientation. Worshippers anywhere in the world needed to know the direction of Mecca so they could face it while praying. The mosques were oriented toward the holy city. The astrolabe was the fundamental astronomical instrument, serving as a clock and navigational tool. Islamic princes also constructed giant instruments to measure the positions of planets and stars for astrological purposes, meaning that the Muslims, they kept astrology. It was very important for them. That's why they're called stargazers. Among the Arabs and Persians were great calculators and mathematicians who worked to improve the cosmological explanation of astronomical measurements. For example, Nasir al-Din al-Tusi at Maraga produced a particularly innovative addition to Ptolemy's circular motions. The Tusi couple calculates a linear motion from a combination of uniform circular motions. In this revolutionary work on the solar system, published in 1543, Copernicus used a strikingly similar device. Also, Copernicus used a model for the moon's motion identical to one devised 2 centuries earlier by the astronomer Ibn al-Shatir in Damascus. Copernicus cited the works of Islamic astronomers and certainly learned from them. Historians are still trying to determine the full extent of his intellectual debt. Go now. That was the moving from the Greek worldview to the introduction of the understanding the planets as spherical bodies to making calculations now to the making of astrolabes. So they they now we are seeing now that we have moved from an antikythera, which is a very advanced astrolabe, is like a computer. It calculates to an astrolabe where you yourself still have to do a lot of the a lot of the calculations. So we have a more primitive astrolabe. So there is a continued degeneration. So, agnosticism, took centuries to, work over and work over, which is, you can look at at the Bible and the versions of the Bible. It was a continued attempt to remove more knowledge and wisdom and understanding from the general population. The Greek worldview. The Greek worldview was the most long lived in the history of scientific cosmology for the development of the Western world and the coming, this is the age of Pisces, really, that they are talking about. Closely tied to the pseudoscience of astrology. It continued from ancient Greece through medieval Islamic civilization to 7th century Europe. Underlying the Greek worldview was the philosophy of Plato. Plato, we can say, is being blamed for our stupidity. He saw the deeper level of reality than that accessible to the senses, or he was just tired of Greek mythology. He also pursued a simple theory about the universe which had incredible explanatory power. The result was a belief in uniform circular motion. This belief dominated the thinking of many Western astronomers and cosmologists for 2,000 years. Circular motion is important. The task for astronomers was to ascertain the motions of the planets. Sky watchers in the ancient Middle East, Central America, and China made many observations. From their tables of numbers, they devised schemes to predict future movements in the heavens. But the explanations that the Babylonians, Mayans, and early Chinese sky watchers devised for these movements were no more than colorful mist. Scientific cosmology, the search for a picture of the universe that will make sense with no mention of divine beings, began with the Greeks. That's the move into agnosticism. They sought to look beyond the patterns of numbers to something fundamental. Under Plato's influence, Greek thinkers attempted to devise combinations of uniform circular motions that would reproduce the observed motions, which were far from regular. Greek philosophers scientists set themselves the task of envisioning the universe as a set of physical objects. Plato's pupil Aristotle came to dominate thinking in this field, where Platonists thought in terms of the idealized mathematics of two-dimensional circles. The Aristotelians envisioned actual three-dimensional spheres. So they were struggling with, is it flat or is it spherical? And they're not even into biology and chemistry and physics for cosmology. Just the visible, what they can see, what is microscopic, totally oblivious to these to these, you know, they pretty much had uh stuff came out of chaos. You know, you gotta be able to take a look, you know, you could say like a eye view, and kind of get a, you know, understanding of, you know, what was going on with, you know, these folks, because there was a lot lacking. There was a lot of, you know, disconnection. One, as people like Aristotle and Plato, they are mental. Maybe if we did some research, they had strong mercurial placements in their astrological chart. They were trying to, they knew that they need to be an advancement from Greek mythology. And going to ancient Egypt enough, it would lead them. You know, they were academics. So they tried to pioneer something more, you know, advanced with very, very little information to, you know, go on. It was largely conceptual. You would think that the planets up there are flat because that's how they look. Aristotle thought that rotating spheres carried the moon, sun, planets, and stars around a stationary Earth. It wasn't heliocentric. The Earth was unique because of its central position and its material composition. All generation and corruption occurred in the sublunar region below the moon and above the Earth. This region was composed of the four elements: earth, water, air, and fire. Here we go. We're getting a little further with earth, air, water, and fire. You know, all of us that got on that occult journey, the whole idea of earth, air, water, and fire, that for us was big for our cosmology. We might not have called it cosmology, but knowing the basic elements of life was a further understanding for us of cosmology, because we are coming from, you know, an agnosticized Christian indoctrination. We got, you know, we did go to school, so we learned chemistry and biology and physics and these type of things. But then when we say, hey man, there's more that we need to, you know, kind of like Plato and these guys, you know, earth, air, water, and fire. It sounds so incredible. It's like, wow, the four elements. Like, you think you're going to be this great magician now. Ah. Beyond the moon was the unchanging and perfect celestial region. It was composed of a mysterious fifth element. Fifth element, the fifth dimension. Greek philosophers estimated the distance to the moon and even tried to calculate the size of the entire universe. Wouldn't it be nice to know the size of the universe, the weight of the universe? The outer sphere of the stars carried them on the mighty courses around the earth. Boy, things are moving around the earth. The natural place for earthly material was down at the center of the universe. Earthly material tended to move to its natural place toward the center of the world. Flames move upward to reach their natural place at the top of the sublunar region. This is absolute confusion here, people. This is what they, you know, thought. Meaning that moving away from mythology, this is what they were what they were moving to. There could be no other words scattered throughout this no other worlds scattered throughout this universe, because their earthly nature would have forced them to move toward their natural place at the center. So there could only be life in the center. With the earth at its center and the sphere of the stars its outer boundary, the Aristotelian cosmos consisted of little more than our solar system. That's all it was. The beginning and the end. It was just a solar system. We didn't have a galaxy. Um, what's that? We didn't have a Milky Way. There's no galaxy. There's no Milky Way. There really is no universe. Wow. Continuation of the Greek tradition of Plato and Aristotle is exemplified in the work of Claudius Ptolemy. He systematized hundreds of years of Greek geometrical cosmology with rigorous demonstrations and proofs. Ptolemy wrote his mathematical treatise, later named the Almagest, in about 150 AD. So this Ptolemy probably wasn't from the Ptolemaic period, because that pretty much ended, like 10 BC or whatnot. This was 150 AD, but he was Egyptian, so he was carrying the name. And Ptolemy is just the way that we've been taught to pronounce it. It is Patolo, me. The heavens were not made of rocks, metal, or other earthly material, but of some divine celestial material. They didn't know what it was made of. This offered no obstruction to the passage of one part through another. So they're talking about the interstellar medium, the blackness of space. In his later book, Planetary Hypothesis, imagine you are living around this time, and this is the available knowledge that you have. You know, Ptolemy used three-dimensional hollow spheres arranged one within another and surrounding the Earth. There was no empty space between the spheres. The thickness of each shell accommodated small motions in and out from the Earth. The rotating spheres itself carried a planet or sun or moon in its orbit around the Earth. From George Purbach's 1553 Theoricae Novae Planetarum. The spheres rotated because that was their natural motion. It was proper, Ptolemy believed. So they didn't know why the planets moved. They didn't know that the electromagnetic field that rises up, that is causing the gear propulsion system of the planet. The spheres Ptolemy believed to attribute uniform circular motion to the planets because disorder and non-uniformity were alien to divine things. The study of astronomy dealing with divine things was especially useful for elevating the human soul. With regard to virtuous conduct and practical actions and character, this science, above all things, could make men see clearly from the constants, order, symmetry, and calm which are associated with the divine. It makes its followers lovers of this divine beauty, accustoming them and reforming their natures, as it were, to a similar spiritual state. I found that that is what cosmology does for you. Uh, this cosmology doesn't do that for me. Maybe he was talking about something else. As the Roman Empire fell, so now this is pretty much what they had. They didn't have a good astrolabe. The Earth was at the center with the planets and whatnot. Even the sun was moving around it. It was absolutely erroneous. It was absolutely incorrect, and these people were absolutely lost. And at the same time, hold on, let's go back and look at that date again. That was 150 AD. That was Ptolemy. The start of scientific cosmology. Revolutions in science, as in politics, often go beyond the limited changes that the people who started the revolution had in mind. In 1543, Nicholas Copernicus, my goodness, Copernicus, his name is Copernicus. Uh, Kepler is the canoe deity of evolution, and Negus means king. Um, in 1543, Nicholas Copernicus proposed to switch the places of the Earth and the Sun. Thank God. 1543. This is after 1492. This is when they really were lost. They didn't have maps of the world. They didn't know it was round. They still thought that it was flat and that you could fall off, and you needed to get on a ship and just keep sailing to prove that you're not going to fall off the edge. When Columbus got on his ships to sail over here, those people that had become the leaders of those places didn't know that the earth wasn't flat. They discovered in South America uh, the Ica stones. Some of the Ica stones are a spherical globe of the earth with the continents on it. That's when they found out that the earth was a sphere for these people. And I had an interesting dream one morning. My ancestors wanted me to know this because it's just unbelievable that up to 1492 these people were lost. Go all the way back to the Greeks. These people are lost. We might have this idea that the people that are in control and everything, that there there's some great mystery and knowledge that they have about life and stuff like that. No, these people really are lost. You know, this this became a part of their. You ever heard of the 100 monkey theory? This prevalent idea, it became a part of their mindset. Remember, they were thrust into the dark ages. It was Islam, it was Muslims with the science that brought them out of the dark ages. Then 1492, they ousted the Moors and whatnot. Columbus couldn't get Spain to back him. I'm sorry, Columbus couldn't get, I think it was Italy to back him because it was like, the earth is flat. Why are we going to give you money to fall off the edge? You're not coming back. So he convinced the Spaniards, they backed him. And then with subsequent trips, they got to South America and they found these Ica stones. And that's when they found out that the earth is not flat, that it's spherical, and saw the different continents and land masses and whatnot. You know, um, how do you even get a spherical map of the planet with the continents? To calculate the position of the planet, Copernicus used elaborate geometrical schemes, unlike his Greek and Islamic predecessors. Right. Ptolemy's system was reasonably satisfactory in matching the observations. Copernicus did not have new and more accurate observations demanding the overthrow of the old theory. It was a yearning for greater mathematical harmony that made him seek something different. In Copernicus's opinion, when Ptolemy had introduced motion around an equipoint, he violated the principle of uniform circular motion. Furthermore, from Copernicus's heliocentric sun-centered theory, several observed phenomena followed automatically, rather than needing to be adjusted as they were in the Ptolemaic theory. To ascribe movement to the earth must indeed seem an absurd performance on my part to those who know that many centuries have consented to the establishment of the contrary judgment, namely that the earth is placed immovably as the central point in the middle of the universe. That's Copernicus. Crazy. A heliocentric system was counted a long established belief and seemed unimaginable to many. This is why Copernicus wrote in the preface to his book that he had hesitated long whether I should give to the light these my commentaries written to prove the earth's motion. His friends, though, had often urged and even importuned me to publish this work. Copernicus hoped that my labors contribute somewhat even to the commonwealth of the church. For not long since the question of correcting the ecclesiastical calendar was debated. Indeed, for centuries, the difficult question of calculating the dates of future Easters had been a main motive of astronomical observations and calculations. So for them, cosmology and cosmological doctrine and understanding, it was important to know the dates of religious holidays because the dates aren't fixed. So, knowing how to calculate the, precession was critical. In Copernicus' system, the rotation of the Earth caused the stars' observed motion rather than the motion of the spheres of the stars. So the starry sphere was obsolete. In the ancient and medieval worldview, the universe is bounded by an outer sphere containing all the stars. The outer starry sphere is simply a region of heaven centered on the earth. In this drawing above left, from a 1566 book by Leonard Digges, his son Thomas finally recognized that the sphere of stars was not logically needed in a universe where the earth rotated. His drawing right centered on the sun shows the stars scattered through a vast open space. Yet this logical consequence of Copernicus's innovation was not immediately realized by Copernicus or by others. It was it was finally recognized by Thomas Digges in a drawing he added as part of an appendix to his father Leonard's book. Leonard Digges had translated and paraphrased the key parts of Copernicus' work. He said to the end, such noble English minds as delight to reach above the baser sort of men might not be altogether defrauded of so noble a part of philosophy. Now the earth was no longer unique. It was merely one of many similar objects in the solar system. If the earth were but one of many similar planets, other planets might also have similar inhabitants. So from the Greek times, uh, earth only was populated with inhabitants for, I guess, Plato and Aristotle and these guys, and they pondered whether or not other places could be. And they were even saying that because it's the center, it would draw life to the center, so there would be no life outside. The print Other planets may also have similar inhabitants, so now they are postulating life outside of Earth. The principle of plenitude, which interpreted any unrealized potential in nature as the restriction of the Creator's power, further encouraged belief in a plurality of worlds. This conclusion was not dramatically emphasized by Galileo and his new telescopic observations. They got a telescope. Oh my God. But aren't we lucky that they got a telescope? You know, they got it from the Moors. You get some glass and bend it, put it in a pipe, bend it, and you look up into the sky. Galileo's father wanted him to study medicine, and he did so briefly at the University of Pisa, but Galileo preferred mathematics. He studied with private tutors in Pisa and then at home. In Florence soon he was given private lessons in mathematics and was later appointed to the vacant mathematics chair at the University of Pisa. Nice. Here he's said to have dropped iron balls from the Leaning Tower as a public challenge to Aristotelian philosophers who said that heavier balls should fall faster. They don't. While Galileo probably never acted as this legend tells, it is true to his spirit, challenging authority, thinking clearly, and relying upon actual observation. Aristotelian professors were certainly not friendly to Galileo, and he soon moved to the University of Padua. Galileo built a telescope and was the first to use this new instrument to systematically explore the heavens, making astonishing discoveries. And Galileo did not build or invent a telescope. Wonder where he got it from. For example, he discovered four satellites of Jupiter early in 1610. He named them the Medican stars after Cosimo de' Medici, the Grand Duke of Tuscany. Later in 1610, Galileo returned to Florence as mathematician and philosopher to the Grand Duke and chief mathematician of the University of Pisa without obligation to teach. Nothing was so disturbing to old ideas as what Galileo saw when he turned his telescope on the moon. His observations of the moon's surface inspired the revolutionary conclusion that the moon was not a smooth sphere, as Aristotelians had maintained. It was uneven and rough like the earth. What then of the ancient dogma that only matter below the sphere of the moon was earthly and perfect? Another similarity, this one between Jupiter and the Earth, was furnished by Galileo's discovery of four satellites of Jupiter similar to the Earth's single moon. How would they possibly fit into the system of spheres used by everyone since Plato? Galileo considered so now with the introduction of the telescope, it's not just what your eyes can see. You It is magnified so you can actually see what you can see, and it's like eureka. What we had is still junk and doesn't actually work. What we have here is better now. To be his most important discovery. In 1613, in a long unpublished letter, Galileo began arguing that scripture and Copernicanism were compatible. Aristotelians tried to bring the power of the church against Galileo, pointing to Bible passages that clearly describe the earth as unmoving. Earth can't move. Galileo argued that while the reconciliation of scientific facts with the Bible was a matter for theologians, they should not interfere with scientists studying nature. In 1616, the church ordered Galileo not to hold or defend Copernicanism. In 1624, Pope Urban VIII, a friend of Galileo, gave him permission to discuss the Copernican system in a book if he gave the Ptolemaic system equal time. The dialogue concerning the two chief world systems was published in Florence in 1632 after some changes required by the Pope. This is usually considered Galileo's masterpiece. Despite his claims to the contrary, the dialogue represents Galileo's strongest endorsements of the Copernican system over its Ptolemaic counterpart, giving devastating refutations of many central tenets of Aristotelian physics. The book still makes for fascinating reading today. There were complaints, and the Inquisition ordered Galileo to appear before it in Rome. He was forced, probably under threat of torture, to acknowledge that he had gone too far in his arguments for Copernicus and to abjure the Copernican heresy. His book was put on the index of forbidden books, where it remained until 1835. In 1633, Galileo himself was sentenced to life in prison. Wow, people went to jail over this stuff. The sentence was immediately commuted to permanent house arrest. He spent his remaining years in his villa in the hills above Florence, writing another masterpiece not on cosmology, but on physics and mechanics. Thank goodness. Aristotelian cosmology envisioned spheres carrying the planets around the Earth, solid crystalline spheres according to some, which provided the physical structure of the universe. They were trying to understand the structure of the universe. They weren't trying to either they weren't trying to, or they didn't know, or they weren't even intelligent enough to postulate the origin and source of the universe, how it had been created. They were just trying to understand it, not how it came to be. Totally different mindset. Is way different from a person who is trying to understand how something happened from a person that's just trying to look at what is happening. Totally different mindset. I repeat, between a person or a people who are trying to understand what happened as just trying to observe and understand what is happening. How did it even get to this point? You know, they keep talking about circular motion for a reason. Circular motion makes sense. It makes perfect sense why there would be this rotation of planets around each other, and it has a lot to do with experience, time and experiencing time. It's 11:39. What time did we start? 10 o'clock, 10:15. We are almost wrapping up. From the standpoint of apparent planetary motions as seen from Earth, this system is observationally indistinguishable from the Copernican model, yet maintains the fixity of Earth, so it was still all wrong. Let me scroll down a bit. It was here that he imagined his chaotic world model based on Platonic solids. The theory was wrong, but it won Kepler. We're moving on to Kepler, Johannes Kepler. Born into an undistinguished and poverty-stricken family, Kepler attended the University of Tübingen, known now in Germany, on scholarship. Studying mathematics and astronomy, he went on to the theological school, intending to become a Lutheran minister. Soon he was asked to leave and teach mathematics at a school in Graz. It was here that he imagined his chaotic world model based on Platonic solids. The theory was wrong, but it won Kepler renown. After Tycho Brahe moved from Denmark to Prague, Kepler visited him there. Kepler recognized the value of Tycho's voluminous observations, more accurate than any previous. He inherited both Tycho's data and the favor of the emperor following Tycho's death in 1601. Studying the data, Kepler found that later became famous as his three laws, along with many other supposed regularities, some correct and others now forgotten. Kepler believed that God, the Creator, had created an orderly and harmonious world. Kepler was committed to Copernicus' heliocentric system both for its technical advantages, which made it possible to dispense with some of the complications of Ptolemy's system, and on philosophical grounds, including a symbolic identification of the Son with God at the center of all things. Kepler's colorful life was marred in the end by, among other things, his mother's trial for witchcraft and a periodically nomadic and economically uncertain existence under stress of wars and political upheaval. Belief in uniform circular motion had been a fundamental aspect of Western astronomy for 2 millennia. This belief was broken early in the 17th century. Kepler, using Tycho's observational data, showed that the Earth and the other planets all travel around the Sun in elliptical orbits. So, um, there is no perfect circle. It's an elliptical orbit, not a spherical, not circular motion, but elliptical motion. I still call it circular, knowing that it's not a perfect circle. Like Earth is not a perfect circle, but it's just using layman speech, not having the energy or the practice of saying it's spherical. Not That's not spherical. Hold on. Elliptical, not spherical. This was the first of Kepler's three laws. It was published in 1609 in Kepler's book on his new astronomy. The laws Kepler found for the motion of the planets applied equally to the orbit of the Earth. He had abandoned the ancient distinction between the physics of our earthly sphere below the moon and the celestial physics of a higher realm. Aristotelian physics no longer worked in the universe of Copernicus and Kepler. A new explanation of how the planets continue to retrace the same paths forever around the sun remained a central problem of cosmology until Isaac Newton explained how objects move under gravity. And it's not gravity. Gravity is a false concept, and the planets rotate around each other in a fixed orbit because they have this electromagnetic system of gears that is keeping that trajectory. Gravity is a combination of the you know inward pull of a mass like a planet to hold it together. There is a pull towards it, and also the pressure. We are under, I guess, billions of tons of air. You know, that is gravity. Isaac Newton, this is the continue to advance cosmology and science in the Western world. His father died before his birth, and his mother remarried within 3 years. Newton was left in the care of a grandmother. Difficult early years, had a difficult life. The explaining the cosmic order. Newton treated the motions of the stars and planets as problems in mechanics, governed by the same laws that govern motions on Earth. He described the force of gravity mathematically. The French philosopher René Descartes, on the other hand, had proposed a non mathematical model. He suggested that the universe consists of huge whirlpools of cosmic matter. Our solar system would be only one of many such whirlpools. Descartes banned from scientific investigation occult phenomena or causes hidden from the senses. He had celestial matter circulating about the earth, pushing all terrestrial matter toward the earth. Descartes' followers distrusted Newton's alternative, a mysterious gravitational force acting at a distance. I mean, this was pretty much spookism, you know. Descartes' Descartes' mechanical, mechanistic cosmology was highly acceptable within the general 17th century conception of the world as a machine. So now they are moving to a mechanical uh, cosmology. During the course of the 18th century, vortex theory proved unable to calculate the observed planetary motions. If you can't calculate the planetary motions, your theory is garbage. It is what they keep saying. As long as you can keep track of the movements and the planets, which are the houses of the gods and the goddesses, as long as you can keep track of that, you're fine. If you can't keep track of that, we don't care what you call it, because it means we would be in chaos. Don't know when Easter is supposed to be. The solar system contains many bodies, and the calculation of the orbit of any planet or satellite is not simply a matter of its gravitational attraction to the body around which it orbits. In addition, other bodies have smaller but not negligible effects called perturbations. For example, the sun alters the moon's motion around the earth, and Jupiter and Saturn modify the motions of each other about the sun. A Swiss mathematician, Leonard Euler, helped develop the mathematical techniques needed to compute perturbation effects. First, he applied them to the moon, and then in 1748 to Jupiter and Saturn with partial success. Still unexplained were large anomalies in the motions of Jupiter and Saturn, and an acceleration of the moon's orbital speed around the Earth. The French mathematical astronomer Pierre Simon Laplace resolved these in 1785 and 1787 in his book Mécanique Céleste, published in 5 volumes between 1799 and 1805. Laplace summarized his studies of celestial mechanics. Here he proposed that all physical phenomena in the universe could be reduced to a system of particles exerting attractive and repulsive forces on one another. And in magnetism, when all these particles are aligned, that's what causes something to be a magnet when they're in order. So now he's getting to particles, microscopic thingamajiggers. I wanted to establish that the phenomena of nature reduced in the final analysis to action at a distance from molecule to molecule, and that the consideration of these actions ought to serve as the basis of the mathematical theory of these phenomena. All the way back to the Greeks. Think of cosmology. Think even of science, what they were calling scientists, people who were scientific. Now we're getting to molecules as being a part of cosmology. Because when we get to the cosmology of the Camus and we get to chemistry, remember, well, how did the planetary bodies get there? What are they made of? This is where you get down now to molecules, where meaning that what they're calling cosmology wasn't the study of the creation of the universe. It was just them trying to figure out what are the planets, where are they, how far they are away, how you know are we moving around them, are we moving around us, you know um wondering if the planets are flat or spherical. But at the very least, someone had the sense to be like, if the math don't work, I don't care what you're saying. So they continue to flesh these theories out and to learn. Laplace's writings were not just for scientists. His 1796 book, Exposition du Système du Monde, summarized for lay people the general state of knowledge about astronomy and cosmology at the close of the 18th century. In the book, Laplace advanced an idea that became known as the nebular hypothesis. He suggested that our solar system and indeed all stars were created from the cooling and condensation of a massive, hot, rotating nebula. This is far beyond Plato and Socrates and Ptolemy and Copernicus, and he's talking about a nebula now, and he's talked about molecules now. Um, these are young people, okay? The Western world, the world as we know it now, is a world that was pioneered by young people. The elders, the Africans, and even the Asians were sidelined. Um, and I really wanted to kind of bring some type of understanding as to why this happened. They needed fresh minds and fresh blood, even fresh genetics to go after, planetary destiny. You know, the old folks were tired of all of the war games, the fighting and the death and the brutality and the, you know, and it wasn't for them to, really pass this on. There is such a thing as learning from scratch. Um, you know, not that you might not be learning from someone else, but there is such a thing as learning from scratch. You develop a lot of power when you have to learn from scratch. That also happened in Kemet, Imhotep. He advanced the Camus understanding of science and masonry and medicine and those types of things. He started building, mastabas, piling them on top of each other, and that was the first, for them, pyramid. Until Khufu, the pyramids weren't very advanced. There was one that kind of bent and broke. The nebular hypothesis strongly influenced scientists in the 19th century as they sought to confirm or challenge it. Elements of the idea remain central to our current understanding of how the solar system was formed. So now they're talking about how the solar system was formed. Prior to this, cosmology was what's the solar system, be they you can always see the sun and the moon. And if you keep looking at it, you know that it's moving, it's moving, it's moving. At night, you can see all these stars. Sometimes during the daytime, you can also see Venus. So they could observe these things from far. They look flat, um, but then they still knew that, uh, knowing their movements affected events on Earth. So being able to calculate the time when things would happen was critical. And for them, that was their cosmology. Writers of the Romantic period in the early 19th century, for example, William Wordsworth in England and Friedrich Schelling in Germany, reacted against Newtonian cosmology, convinced that the cosmic order was beyond scientific explanation. They sought to breathe divine life back into what seemed an overly mechanized and increasingly godless universe. Agnostic. The German philosopher Immanuel Kant argued against the Romantics, insisting that metaphysics could not provide an account of the foundations of physical, corporeal nature, and that the issue of the existence of God was completely divorced from direct sense experience. For him, the Newtonian solar system provided a model for the large stellar system. Kant reasoned that the same cause which gave the planets their centrifugal force, keeping them in orbits around the sun, could also have given the stars the power of revolving, and whatever made all the planets orbit in roughly the same plane could have done the same to the stars. Nebulous appearing objects in the heavens became, in Kant's mind, island universes like colossal solar systems. Kant's thoughts about the universe had little observational content. The foundations of his cosmological hypotheses were philosophical and theological. Observations first entered cosmology in a major way late in the 18th century thanks to an English amateur astronomer, William Herschel. William Herschel and the construction of the heavens. The Newtonian solar system offered a model for the large stellar system. The arrangement of the stars might well be similar to that of the planets. Furthermore, the Newtonian system provided by analogy a physical explanation for a disk structure. The same cause which gave the planets their motion and directed their orbits into a plane could also have given the power of revolving to the stars and brought their orbits into a plane. So they don't know how planets move. They're still trying to figure out how planets move. You know, going back to the Antikythera, uh, and thankfully to my ancestors and the insight that they gave me, one, planets are spaceships. A planet is a ship. It has a propulsion system that uses electromagnetism. You know, those electromagnetic lines that go up into the air, invisible, of course. That that is part of the propulsion system of planets, suns, moons, and pl- and and planets like Earth. From his observations, William Herschel reported in 1784 a very remarkable circumstance attending the nebula and clusters of stars is that they are arranged into strata, which seem to run to a great length, and some of them I have already been able to pursue so as to guess pretty well at their form and direction. It's probably enough that they may surround the whole apparent sphere of the heavens, not unlike the Milky Way, which undoubtedly is nothing but a stratum of fixed stars. This diagram is like it is kind of two-dimensional, so he is grabbing. Looking out from the Earth ascending toward us, a dense slab of stars becomes the band of the Milky Way. Looking away from us, a split in the Milky Way comes from a division in the distribution of stars. Trying to understand the Milky Way. Since during the 19th century now, Herschel's speculative cosmology failed to attract disciples. It was crap. Professional astronomers could not accept his assumption that stars are equal in brightness, although it was needed as a working hypothesis to estimate the stars' distances. That's pretty much as far as we will go. 1 hour and 45 minutes. Classes are 1.5 hours. We are 145. And now we got to the part where they're, talking about molecules. Um, the next class we are going to be getting into the cosmology at Anu, and we're going to be getting into science. You know, molecules and atoms, the hydrogen fusion cycle, and from my research, this information was really supposed to help white supremacy to stand on its legs. Maybe that's why you had some people out there saying the racist stuff, because one of the things that the Dogon cosmology and the Canoe cosmology does is that it shows that there isn't really much advance. There hasn't been an advancement in technology and science by the Western world. It's like they said there's nothing new under the sun, and the Western world is still catching up. They they are just about caught up though in terms of understanding science and technology, and don't don't expect to see the advances, meaning in our life. It's a wrap. But you want to get an understanding of the science and this wisdom, it will carry you into the future. It will give you a place. The more you know, the more useful you are. So it is important that you put your education, you know, as a priority. I do a lot of study, and I do a lot of meditation on what I have learned, because it's like you have to remind yourself, you know, you have to remind yourself of those important things, because we live in a world full of distractions. So what we are seeing here with cosmology, and why we we had to get into the history of cosmology, because what we have is an agnostic cosmological understanding, and it's really underdeveloped. It was really pioneered by children, and now we want to get to a more advanced cosmological doctrines. You saw how they were trying to make sure that they understood that they could track the planetary bodies. If you study sidereal astrology, Hinduism, etc., the the planetary bodies are peace, are the gods and the goddesses. Astrology and its influence on us from the planetary bodies, it's important to know certain events. It's important, from a governmental leadership position. Astrology, meaning astronomy, becomes important because you can tell and get an idea of what type of things are coming, so that you can prepare, so that you can safeguard yourself. It's just not, I want to know because I want to sound good knowing. It's for safety. It's like, who are the people in your neighborhood? Your neighborhood consists of, the planets in the solar system and the constellations, and the fact that it is a machine. It is a contained machine with the zodiac signs and the sun, the moon, and stuff like that, and the way that it affects us. Uh, Peace and blessings, everyone. I hope that everybody enjoyed it. If you want to shoot me any types of emails, you can shoot me an email. And, if you want to know any type of references and, stuff like that, I will say do research on Francis Bacon, to get a better idea of the diversion between occultism science and contemporary academic science, whereby you still had occultists were responsible for science, but they were connected to the lodges and stuff like that, the Masonic lodges, and that changed, whereby the people that were going to be teaching science had nothing to do with the occult, with the deities, with angels, with demons, with gods, with goddesses, etc. It was going to be purely agnostic. Peace and love, everyone, and have a nice day, and see you tomorrow.